Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first It Studios Roundtable. We're going to be doing a lot of these, and we wanted to get together about a new movie that came out recently, Prey. I'm Kyle from the Movie Wars podcast.
And I'm Jason from the All 80s Movies podcast.
I'm Wayne G, Recasted 2.0.
I'm Mike Campbell, also known as Bull, and I am the host of the Ship It Movie Drafts podcast.
How did we get all these people in the same room, ladies and gentlemen? You know, these roundtables aren't going to be a typical movie review for those listening, and those that are new to Ship It, which you may be, especially the Movie Wars audience, because we've just started recently introducing Ship It to our fan base because we're a part of this amazing network. And what's cool about this roundtable, it's not just going to be your typical movie review. Yes, we're going to review elements and themes, but you know, Ship It consists of all these different podcasts that are very niche to movies. If you're someone that says, I love movies, I love podcasts, but I'm kind of sick of the same, oh, this scene was cool, this scene was cool. That's why Ship It is amazing. We have people that recast movies. We have people that put movies against each other, people that focus specifically on your favorite decade. We have people that focus on shows, and the list goes on. Go to the website, Google Ship It Studios to find out all the amazing podcasts we have so you can see who's in the network. But that's why this roundtable is going to be really unique. And so I'll kick us off a little bit. You know, I think, you know, Prey is an interesting movie. It kind of snuck up on me. And anybody that listens to Movie Wars knows that I'm an Arnold lifer. I use that word a lot. I'm a Keanu lifer. I'm an Arnold lifer. Predator's in my top 50, you know, top 10, actually. This genre is where I live. As you can see, I've got a RoboCop poster on the wall. Terminator, those are my movies. I call it pop sci-fi. That's kind of my jam, so to speak. So I'm always interested to see what they're trying to do with these different franchises. And Predator hasn't failed as much as, you know, I would say a RoboCop. I think RoboCop being like top 3 for me kind of fell off pretty quick. I think Predator 2 was pretty cool. It was kind of cool to see Predator in a city. I don't think it failed as hard until it got into the later renditions, then it failed really hard. So it hasn't suffered as poorly as some of these other ones. But I think all of us here at Ship It, we're really stoked to see this movie come out and do this roundtable. But I want to pivot over to our friend Jason, because Jason, his whole podcast is dedicated to my favorite decade of films, because all of my favorite movies I just listed came out before 1990. So Jason, why don't you kick us off? We're all going to answer this roundtable style, but you kick us off here because of and talk about the specificity of your podcast. But what is it about the first Predator that was special, and what makes it difficult to replicate what was so special about what happened in 1987?
Well, thanks, Kyle. Thanks for setting me up, pal. How much time do we have?
As much time as you want.
All right. I'm just
a minute and a half for response.
I just like the fact that you brought up RoboCop already, one of my favorite 80s films. So the All 80s Movies podcast, which I co-host with my talented partner, Bill Bant, does focus solely on the decade of the 80s. And we cover the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between. And of course, the original Predator, 1987. What a year for 80s movies. Let me start from this, man. I was in high school from 1988 to 1991. I took an AP college prep physics course. Shout out to Mr. Boardman. And he used to infrequently mention the believability of science fiction films based on pure physics. And I'll never forget when he said something to the effect of, Predator, now that's a good sci-fi film. And I was like, hell yeah. So what makes Predator, the original, so special? Outside of being the first film, there is the obvious. Kyle, you touched on this already. Arnold Schwarzenegger. At this time, yeah, he's the biggest action star in the world. He was Conan, he was Terminator, Commando, and now Dutch. Well, that doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but he was larger than life. Now make him a special forces soldier, surround him with other physical behemoths such as Carl Weathers, Jesse Ventura, Sonny Landham, and Bill Duke, and I'm in. It's the original Expendables. My men are not expendable. So it's special because it's brilliant in its simplicity. It's seductive on the most primal level. It's the thrill of the hunt, the most dangerous game. It's 100% visceral. What makes it extra special for me is just this combination of cool layering on top of the common storyline trope of the monster killing off our characters one by one. First of all, you got John McTiernan's ability to direct action. There's the cool misdirection in the storytelling. It's a rescue mission turned into a survival story. Unique creature design. Thank you, Stan Winston, for the mandibles. And the added cool mystery and lore. I mean, the exotic, scary setting of the jungle, sweet sci-fi technology. Give me a plasma cannon any day. kick-ass sound design. I love the score by Alan Silvestri. It goes on and on and on, but ultimately Schwarzenegger and his cheesy one-liners, stick around. I mean, this film is so often quoted still today. What else can I say? Why is this particular movie so difficult to replicate? Well, after the first movie, the cat's out of the bag, right? Predator's been revealed. We know what it looks like. We know what it does. We know the mystery is now gone. One way is to keep adding more and more lasers, as we see in the sequels, and we can, discuss their successfulness ad nauseum. Now, it's just hard to replicate the perfect balance. We've got science fiction, action, thriller, horror, and humor all packed into one here in Predator, the original. So it's impossible to replicate Schwarzenegger's presence as a movie star, the ineffable charm of an 80s action genre film. It was just plain done differently back then. A magical sense of just go with it, suspension of disbelief, escapism, wondering when Arnold's going to deliver the next one-liner, and it was just pure fun. You can't replicate that. The only chance you have at success is to go back to the basic story frame, put your twist on it, come up with some characters we care about, make us want to watch the journey in overcoming overwhelming odds using their wit and tools in interesting ways. And that's what I got, man.
That was beautifully said. I want that in the form of a poem after this podcast. That was so.
I can arrange that.
I don't even know what to say now. Wayne G, tell us about Recasted, what you do, and what do you think about this first question here?
Absolutely. So Recasted 2.0, what we do is we take movies that are at least 20 years old, we recast them with modern day actors and actresses, and then we put it out there to a fan vote of whose cast they like better, which movie would they be more likely to go see. We just recently started adding recasting directors in there as well, so we can change the entire feel of the film as well as the cast. So it's been a lot of fun. Me and Jesse do it, and this most recent episode we did Philadelphia, and it gets a little chippy. So if you listen to the episode, me and him get a little bit chippy in this one.
They got very chippy. I just finished it. It's a great episode, and yes, chippy's a good word for it.
As far as Predator, what I really want to touch on, I mean, I know that Jason mentioned it already, the uniqueness of the film, the alien hunter, this is something that we hadn't seen before. And the reason it's hard to duplicate, like he said it perfectly, the cat's out of the bag, right? So now we know what it is. It's like you taste chicken for the first time. It's like, great, this is awesome. But now when you have it again, how do you make it just as good? Well, you've got to add pepper, you've got to add spice. And I just feel like the spices that they were adding to Predator weren't making it taste better. It felt poorly repackaged, I guess. The other thing I liked about Predator was the horror aspect of it. I remember watching this movie, even as a teenager, being scared when they find the bodies that are skinned hanging in the forest. Like, it's scary. This movie my heart's racing, So that horror aspect was gone in Predator 2. It was more of a straight action, throw on some cheesy lines. So you lose the horror aspect, which was another thing that made it unique. And then, of course, it's an 80s movie. We're guys. As weird as it may sound, we like big, sweaty, muscular guys. That's why we love Top Gun. We all love the volleyball scene. Let's not lie about it, right? We love seeing these muscular guys sweating it up, especially with their giant guns. So it was everything we love about over-the-top 80s action.
Bring the oil. Perfect. Mike.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely echo the horror elements on how to introduce the character against this all-star crew. I mean, you're just slowly picking one off one by one, and then you have this ultimate matchup with the greatest action star in the prime of his career, that whole setup. And even just tapping into some of the movie draft elements where we're looking down to individual characters and how do they fit and what are they bringing to the table. You have this Predator character that is built as the ultimate hunter. And what is so unique about him is he doesn't say a word of English throughout the whole movie, yet he's arguably a top 100 character coming off of it. And just the layers of it, of how he manipulates his prey, the different strategies he takes. But I think the added layer that really sets him apart is this kind of moral code as well. Like, you see him go and target specific people that he views as threats, and that's how he goes off of. So they add in these little nuances to the character that really set it apart. And even coming off of that, like I mentioned, having Arnold in the prime of his career, you would expect them just continue to lean into Arnold going off of that. Yeah, we've just focused on the Predator character, and that's been the franchise. So I think it was just this perfect hybrid mix at the perfect time. And now we get to see, what creative angles they can go from here with it.
That's awesome. This is Kyle from Movie Wars. Once again, Movie Wars is a podcast where we take the greatest films of all time that have similar themes, and they don't always have to be the same type of movie. They just have to have similar themes, maybe similar director, just something that ties the movies together theme-wise. We put them against each other, but we don't just use traditional categories like Oscar types, like best film or, best cast. We like to make theoretical ones. I'm a former stand-up comedian, a failed stand-up comedian, so a lot of the categories are often funny. And so it's never us trying to say what's the better film. It's just basically us putting these movies against a fake gradient that creates banter and comedic conversation between my co-host Phil, Drew, and myself. I'm going to take us back a little ways to 1979 when Alien came out. I think Predator is interesting. It's one of those what I like to call lightning in a bottle moments. We don't get a lot of them anymore because we're very spoiled with computer technology and with CGI. Predator benefits from being very raw in terms of the aesthetic. We're not seeing a ton of effects. There are special effects in it, but it's so minimal and so noticeable that it really doesn't dominate the film in terms of their presence in the film. But, Alien was one of the first movies to say, because before Alien, there was still kind of this, gray man, bald man gets off a UFO. What is in outer space? Ridley Scott said, no, aliens are going to kill you. They're horrible. They're evil. And they're going to burrow into your, body sexually and come out of your chest. Alien set that tone. So Predator, almost a decade later, benefits from this new, like whatever's coming from outer space is really scary and evil and violent. And this one, the idea of it being a hunter is even more special because he's in our territory. We're not in his territory in outer space. But John McTiernan here, John McTiernan changed action because I love what everyone has said so far about the muscle, the oil. I'm as big of an Arnold fan as there is. But when Bruce Willis did Die Hard really changed the genre because even though he's relatively muscular, good looking, he's not quite as average as I would say, not to insult everybody, but I'm definitely an average Joe here. He's not as average as me, but compared to Arnold, compared to Rambo, Sylvester Stallone, he's pretty average, but he still saves the day. And what happens to him? He gets beat up. He's bloody. John McTiernan changed the action. And the fact that this is his second film, he did a very little known film, but with Pierce Brosnan called Nomads the year before, which isn't as well known. But so this is basically John McTiernan coming onto the scene with action, with Arnold, who, by the way, he didn't want to deal with Arnold. He didn't want to deal with the stardom. John McTiernan doesn't like guns. I know that's stupid and ironic, but everything about John McTiernan really shouldn't have worked for this movie, but it did. And like I said, lack of CGI, what Jason said earlier, the biggest up-and-coming star in the world. He hasn't even done T2 yet. He is on the rise. It's just lightning in a bottle. And I think, honestly, I go back to the lack of CGI. We're so spoiled with it. The later films in the franchise really had to depend on that. Like Wayne said, the cat was out of the bag. The horror element was gone. So they were trying to mess with how the Predator looked. They tried to mess with who in one of the Predator films, or the one that came out before Prey, they were like what were they mental institution patients, and like they're always trying to mess with what he looks like and who he's going to kill, or how many of them are going to kill how many of whoever the new kind of cast is, which actually leans more into like Friday the 13th. Who are the meat bags in training, which is really what Friday the 13th is built on. So that's my thoughts on the movie. As far as what they're trying to replicate, what was special, and why they've had a hard time. Next category. Where does this rank all time for the Predator films? You don't have to go through your whole stack rank, but did this really move the needle? Did this place in your top 3, top 5? Jason, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Thanks. I'm putting it in the number 2 slot. Unapologetically, I love this film. I'm in. This is my bag. So I've got it ranked from number 1 to number 7. If we are including the Alien versus Predator films, I'm going to go Predator, Prey, Predators, Predator 2, The Predator, then A versus P, and then A versus P Requiem, if that makes sense. I just think the first film is still the most entertaining overall. I absolutely love that you guys touched on the horror aspect, as well as just paying some homage to Alien. I mean, that's what it's about, because the first one it provides such a sense of real fear and dread that is somewhat missing from the subsequent films. So yeah, but after that, Prey still has a great balance of the elements, that sci-fi, action, and thriller all in one, a sense of adventure, a connection to the nature aspect, something that I could identify with. It feels very well thought out. the Predator itself, the creature design, etc. I mean, I could go down a list, but some of the issues with the other films. I mean, I thought Predators, which I have at number 3, had some great elements, but the characters are mostly deplorable. The Predator was Shane Black. Speaking of Predator, the first one, which a lot of people mistakenly say that he wrote, but he was just a script doctor on that. He kind of polished it a little bit. But he did write The Predator, and his quirky writing style just wasn't successful for this kind of story. That's just my opinion. That's just a taste thing. I love his work otherwise. But yeah, so I've got Prey at number 2. And a shout out to Amber Mid-Thunder for her performance. I think she does some great eye acting in the film. And I love that they didn't sexualize her character. Yeah, so I think I'm going to hand it over to someone else now.
Boom. That was well said. I love that they didn't do that to her. Her comedy is good too. I mean, her line delivery when she does need
good timing.
Funny, it was really good timing. So I totally agree with you there. Wayne.
Yeah, so this movie for me ranks number 2 as well. I think that the first one, maybe it's just nostalgia. I know sports fans talk about us Jordan fans as old heads, right? And I think maybe I just have that nostalgia factor of, seeing Predator when it came out and always having that. And so, it's always going to be number 1 probably, although it could fall. The reason I have Prey number 2, obviously, is it's a really cool concept. I love the idea of a prequel that goes back to the 17 whatever, before we had automatic weapons and things like that. That's a really cool concept. And the Predator hadn't evolved yet either. He was still evolving, which is kind of cool. And then we also have, the cinematography is amazing in this film. So the 2 other movies it reminded me of, one is The Revenant, right? You think of the cinematography in The Revenant, and you think of the cinematography in Brokeback Mountain, right? Which both of those, again, kind of Midwestern, lots of trees, lots of nature, and this kind of followed that same path. So I really enjoyed the cinematography. I do have it number 2. I think it gets a little too much hype, maybe way too much hype out there in the world because of the inclusion factor. I mean, we saw the same kind of hype come around when Black Panther came out, which I love Black Panther. Shang-Chi came out and it got tons of hype. People were calling it the best Marvel movie ever, which I think in hindsight, a little bit of a hyperbole there. And then people are calling this a phenomenal movie. I'm like, no, Braveheart's a phenomenal movie. And people are talking about, Mid-Thunder here, and she's fine, but does she really do anything special? I mean, she's not Daniel Day-Lewis, she's nothing special here. Her character has no arc whatsoever, and she didn't bring anything to the character. It's fine, but people are just putting this way up on a pedestal. Let's keep it at number 2. Let's keep the hyperbole in check, is what I think.
Well said, Mike.
Yeah, I would stick with Predator at number 1. I think, as we said, it was the perfect mix at the perfect time for just how that was constructed. Prey would put it at number 2. I would be curious to see kind of how it ages, how people go back and watch it. It is a very smooth watch. It's about 90 minutes, which you expect, more recent movies trend longer and longer and add too much, fat at the end. But I think it could be a really nice, clean rewatch if we look at down the road. After that, I would go Predators, then Predator 2. And these 2 films have been the most interesting for me to kind of watch as people have reacted and gone back and revisited the series. I think I've seen the most people outside of their viewing of Prey speak about these 2 films specifically. A lot of it is, hey, Predators was actually a really good movie. Like, you guys should go revisit that if you haven't lately. And then Predator 2, I think it's this kind of hybrid where people are like, I'm not ashamed, I love this movie, and almost like defending their love of it. So those are just 2 really interesting reactions I've seen amongst the fans. From there, I'd go AVP, just because I'm just happy it happened, just having 2 iconic characters. Even the movie was a little bit underwhelming, but just remember the hype going into it. Just as a film fan, just the fact that they would actually put these together in a movie. And then from there, I'd go probably Shane Black's Predator and then into Requiem, where they definitely drop off in quality. But that would be my roster.
Well done. Yeah, I'm an outlier here. I didn't expect this. I went number 4 with Prey. Now, my reasons for there's no question for anybody in the world that Predator number 1 is number 1 on the list. All right, so we don't have to revisit that. But Predator 2 is not the same kind of movie. Cat was already out of the bag. But it's for selfish reasons. Gary Busey's a scientist. Gary Busey who got in a motorcycle accident and says, I went to heaven and came back. I mean, is a scientist studying the predator. I don't think they meant to play that as comedy. And it's good to note as a random fact, he was on his comeback. People weren't really giving him a lot of opportunities because they didn't really know what they were going to get with Gary Busey. Because after the accident, I mean, he went from Buddy Holly to this very manic, very all over the place. You didn't know who you were going to get from day to day. So this was kind of one of his early castings after the accident. And I think he actually does really well as a crazy haired scientist. Danny Glover is not an amazing leading man. I like Danny Glover a lot, but the idea of the Predator in the city is fun for me. We get Bill Paxton. And I think after Bill Paxton died, now every time I revisit Bill Paxton, I miss him so much because he did a thing and you took it for granted while he was alive, but now he's gone. Like, man, Bill Paxton always added to these 80 pop sci-fi movies. He's in Terminator, he's in Aliens, he's in Predator 2. He's doing all these movies. So there's so much to love about Predator 2. In the 3 spot, I went Predators, actually, the Adrian Brody one, and I don't think it's a great film, but I did appreciate there was a little bit of acting in it. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I do feel like because Adrian Brody's there, he's a fantastic actor. He does add a little credibility and he does do it on the screen. I actually did like them adding multiple Predators. I know Predator 2 ended with multiple, but the fact that they tried to do something different with the design, it wasn't too far off. And that's where Prey landed 4 for me was I didn't love the design. I couldn't tell when it was CGI or when it was a costume. Again, they cast another 7-footer like they have in a lot of the other films to play the Predator, but there was a lot of him being CGI too. I didn't love the design. This is where the Cloverfield, this comes from the crew that brought us Cloverfield. I can't remember which Cloverfield film it was, if someone has that in the back of their mind, but you can see that monster that they designed for Cloverfield. You can see that inspiration here, and I didn't love it. I thought Mid-Thunder did a great job. I did love, one thing we talk about on Movie Wars a lot, because we've covered a lot of Brando, is this idea of the indigenous actors actually being cast in a serious way. And yeah, they have humor, but they actually are cast to play these roles really well. They're not the laughing aspect. They're not the joke of the movie. They are paying homage to their heritage in this film, I think. And I really thought that was refreshing, considering that so many times in film, indigenous people can be kind of miscast to be the joke or the punchline. So I did love that aspect. And then the last few slots, I'm not even gonna give them cadence. You lump Shane Black's movie together with the AVP movies. That's the last slot. Whatever that is, that melted jelly bean from your backseat of your Camry, that's what that is. So, all right. Was this loyal to the Predator lore, Jason?
I think absolutely. You know what? It's one of my favorite things about this movie. I am all about world building and lore and mythology. The more, the better for me. That's what I sink my teeth into. I mean, being an 80s kid, I'm a Star Wars guy. So that's again, it's my wheelhouse as far as my fandom goes. So I love all the Easter eggs and the quotes that reference even the original film. And I love the tech. Give me the tech. We've got a predated predator species that fits this time period, which is supposed to take place approximately 300 years ago. Wayne touched on this. I believe it's 1719 in the Great Plains. What a great concept. The mask of the predator has a different design, but still has the thermal scanning and targeting. Oh my God, give me that glowing red triangle that zooms in. And that infrared that, just scanning the heat signal coming off the warm bodies, the dual serrated knives extending from the wrist pack, the metallic extending spears. But then they kind of update it or predate the tech. So instead of the plasma cannon, we have this arrow shooter, basically, and the 3 dots that zoom in that we're like, oh my God, it's going to be the laser. No, they actually separate and we get 3 separate arrows coming at a target. I mean, so much in the sound design, which is right in line with the lore. The rattle of the predator, the howl, the mimicking of the voices, the green blood. But here's the thing, guys. For me, the extremely cool aspect regarding the lore is that we are to understand that this is the predator's first visit to our planet. And I think Mike was kind of touching on this too, is that we see the predator's process, so to speak, determining who or what will be the challenge for the title of apex predator, what makes worthy prey. So at least in this particular region. And it's something we don't get in the other films. We watch the food chain. You know, we watch the predator's process going from snake to wolf to bear to human, and ultimately Naru, played by Amber Midthumber, is the ultimate prey for the hunt. But and then the tables get turned. But I think my favorite moment, in line with like the lore of the Predator, is the reveal of the French musket dated 1750 with the name Raphael Adelini in it, because we know Danny Glover in Predator 2 receives that as a prize, basically that same musket, which opens up a whole can of worms of possibilities of questions for this franchise. So I thought that was a great idea to insert it. So I love what they did with enhancing the lore by taking it backwards. And that's my take.
I'm still glad you brought that up. Because I haven't seen it in a few weeks. Those were great. And because it felt like, I don't know how you felt, Jason, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were paying attention to the Predator fan that was there in 87, watching this movie every year.
No doubt.
Celebrate. I felt cared for.
Definite fan service, but I didn't feel like they were beating us over the head with it. It was just a nod to the greatness of the first film.
Side topic off what you're talking about, staying with the theme of paying homage to the original. Did anybody else think that? I want to know if I was the only one that caught this when Naru is trying to save her brother, and I think it's the Frenchman who cut his chest from collarbone. Do you remember that scene? They cut him. Was that insinuating that maybe these are the ancestors of Billy, played by Sonny? Because remember when Billy sacrifices himself for the Predator for Arnold to get away, and he cuts himself from collarbone to thigh?
Yep. Now, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is a fact. It is a cool thing. Well done on your behalf on picking that up, because I did not think about it. I on the surface, I thought about it, but then in a little bit of loose research, just doing the general IMDb, Wikipedia stuff, that is confirmed that Billy, the Native American giant in Predator, is a reincarnation of Tabe, the brother who is cut. And he is, when Billy basically sacrifices himself, but kind of in a way to stall the Predator in the first film, he is having basically a callback to a previous life, which is Tabe, in almost avenging him, or in a way just replaying his death and sacrificing himself for the greater good.
That almost makes me put this at number 3. Just that little fact. I regret it now. Now that I remember that little factoid, I'm doing it. It's 3 now.
Done.
Thank you for writing that little rabbit trail with me. Wayne, what do you think?
Well, in terms of loyalty, is it loyal to the lure? I think yes, but also no, right? So I think that yes, it is, in the sense that the Predator is a hunter and he wants to hunt the biggest game. That's what his goal is. And so humans are the biggest game because of our technology and because of the way that we can fight back. Where I think it kind of falls on that note is that, you know, it's supposed to be Predator's first time on Earth, we're assuming, which is why he starts off with the snake, why he starts off with the rabbit and then the wolf, and trying to figure out which one is prey, which one is the hunter. And he keeps working his way up until he gets to humans. And yet in AVP, they've been coming here for hundreds of years. So how could this be his first time here? You know what I mean? So that's one of my things, that it seems like it's his first time here. And it might be that guy's first time here, but they've obviously been coming here for hundreds of years. So that was one thing where I thought it was kind of inconsistent. You know, the other thing I think that I didn't really love was the technology, right? We see the bone mask, we see like the arrows that shoots out, like you said, instead of the plasma gun. And essentially over the next 200 years, it's going to advance in technology over 200 years. Okay, hang on a second. So we've got spaceships that can do intergalactic travel. We've got heat sensors in our masks. We've got laser sighting, but the best technology we have is metal spikes that shoot out. So there's a little bit of inconsistencies there. So I think it didn't stay true to the all of the movies, but if you want to discount AVP, then we can. But I'm just thinking, if I take that into consideration, it didn't stay true to the fact that Predator's been here before.
Shouldn't there be a process to to pick the next director. If they're going to continue our favorite franchises, like that's my thing with RoboCop. People ask me, why was RoboCop 2 such a drop off? Because Verhoeven wasn't there. Verhoeven is one of the most unique because he's a guy that hates sci-fi, but he directs the most prestigious sci-fi films, Total Recall, RoboCop. But you're right. Like there should be a process, because what happens like with the AVP series is there's such a drop off and it screws up the lore, you know, and it messes with the timelines. It's really, this is why there needs to be a process. I know that that's really a dream and it's theoretical, but that should happen. Wayne, make that happen. Right now. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the core of what it wanted from the movie was there, especially when we look at the character, because that's the relationship we have going into it. And I think when you look at the plot evolving throughout the course of the movie, the matchups that are going to happen, this sort of movie is going to play out much different than watching a Predator go against Arnold and his crew, right? So I think that I love that the mindset and the strategy was there, but also it almost adopted and changed its fighting style. You know, it had some differences on the weapons that it had available, but still the main beats were there, but it didn't really use a lot of those. And it was much more willing to go, you know, fist to cuffs on like going hand-to-hand combat even, which is something we really haven't seen until maybe the last battle. But just thinking to the scene when he comes across that group in the woods, and it's really like hands-on combat. And I love those elements of it. And because you have the stakes of that matchup, and it's not just he's going through and, you know, clearing through everyone because he has maybe superior technology. He's really trying to prove that he is the best and going even to kind of their playing field and prove that he can best them on that. So I love that element, bringing that and just adding some additional layers to the character.
And isn't it amazing that the Predator was able to kill the worst CGI bear ever put on?
Him and Leo.
Can we just talk about, Wayne, you said Revenant earlier. I love that you connected those two because there are so many similarities in terms of theme and cinematography, but how did they just not call the crew from Revenant? This is the worst bear. This is the worst CGI.
Borrow that file.
Yeah. 2022, I'm looking at this bear I'm like, the Predator looks fine when he's in CGI mode, whenever they had to CGI him, but the bear is so bad. It took away the experience. It was that bad. And that leans into my comment, which is the reason I think it does okay. And I love what Jason said. It was kind of fun connecting those as a fan, as a diehard Predator fan. They did pay service, which it felt great because a lot of the other films don't do that. And in fact, they do the opposite. They screw it up royally. So it felt good to be cared for as a Predator fan. But the use of CGI here, we talk about this on Movie Wars all the time. A lot of the greatest films come from the 80s and mid 90s and before, because they deal with budgets and they don't have infinite resources. They just could go make a CGI bear here. In 87, they didn't really have it. It probably took 3 weeks to render infrared vision, you know, the infrared vision effect of the Predator. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but in T2, the liquid metal man effects, those took months to render sometimes. Some of those, like to render a 2-minute scene, took months. In 1992, I think, is when T2 came out. We're talking primitive effects here. So they're oftentimes operating outside of that. So I think some of the newer Predator films really suffer when they get away from the raw, like I said, lightning in a bottle, 80s action. They can't replicate it for that reason. I do love the nods to being a dedicated Predator fan, but that was it. Everything else, I kind of thought, you know, they got away from the formula John McTiernan set in the 80s. So that's my thought. All right.
Wow.
This is, do you have something else to add?
Oh, no. Well, I was just going to jump ahead to a question coming up. One thing I would change, and I'm just going to piggyback. I just wish they would get rid of the animal CGI. Stop it. Yeah. Just plain stop it. It's like old person makeup effects. Just stop it. Stop doing it. You haven't figured it out. Wait till we perfect it. It's like 3D in theaters. Stop it. It's not working.
It removed me
I'm going off on tangent, but it takes, the only reason I went with it in this film is because the story and the characters for me, I was invested in, and luckily it made me gloss over it, but it's glaring. The animal CGI is really distracting. So you got to use real animals. There were practical effects in certain shots, but you got to creatively cut around it. You can do it. It's been done before. It was done better in the 80s and in other films, et cetera. But just blended better. But yeah, I just was going to rant on that for a little bit. So thanks.
The boar in 87 was so convincing. Remember the boar that they think is a predator?
Yeah, absolutely.
That looked great. That was 87. The bear, it took me out of it so much I had to rewind and rewatch it. I was like, oh my God. Anyway, Wayne, what do you think?
On that note, I would say, yeah, I think that part of the problem is probably the fact that this was made for a streaming service. It's a streaming service movie. This was not a major theatrical release. So their budget wasn't the same. Their CGI budget's not the same, right? And we got to take that into consideration because there's no star power in this movie. What this is, an indie film called Vampire Train, right? I mean, it's just some movie that nobody's going to watch, but it happened to be actually really good. So everybody watched it. So I think that they weren't anticipating it to be what it was, and that's maybe why they kind of fell short in the CGI. I think that they can make it work. I think that they just didn't have it in the budget because they weren't expecting this to be what it was.
Yeah, Mike, what do you think? What's one thing you would change? Is the CGI bear? Just kidding.
Too worried about the dog the whole time, man. I'm telling you, every scene it was in, I was at the edge of my seat. Yeah, I think that finding that balance with the character, I don't know if that necessarily changes, but just something that, on evolving the predator itself, you can go to kind of different areas, different technology, but kind of what's the next step to that? I think that's where you have to kind of mess around with the elements on adding in maybe multiple predators into the mix, or seeing that dynamic off of them, or putting in more close contact with another character throughout it. So I actually thought this movie paced out and went pretty smooth all in all. So not a ton I would change, just more looking at kind of where they can take it going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Great thought. So we're going to close on this question here. Where can they take this in the future? And I actually like this question a lot because this was one of the fun elements was experiencing this in the social media age, even though I think social media should be completely destroyed and deleted and thrown away forever. And we didn't have to deal with this when we were kids, right? We just went to school and talked to each other about the movies we snuck in to see or caught on Cinemax that day. But where can they, one of the things that social media was buzzing about is like, I want to see Predator versus Samurai. I want to see Predator in World War II. Like the fanfare started to go to town. I did enjoy that real time enjoyment element of it. Jason, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think, and a shout out to Dan Trachtenberg, who directed this. Just great. I've been fortunate to listen to some other podcasts and talented podcasters talk about his trajectory and interviewing him. And he's just a really thoughtful guy, and he really is selective about the work that he does. And he made this it could be a standalone film, but it still makes me want to know more. We've got 7 Predator films, and I'm still intrigued after watching this. I want to see more now. Fan-frickin-tastic. So, for instance, I would love to know how the French musket ends up back in the hands of the predators. So somebody touched on this earlier. What is the next stage in human evolution in relation to the predator, like human evolution in relation to predator evolution? So hunting and survival tactics, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought this might be cool if somehow the Comanche retrieve like the deceased predator from the quicksand and develop and use the tech. We do like an alternate timeline, alternate history, where the Comanche become a technologically advanced society and change the course of history because they can defend and defeat the oncoming frontiersmen. Now that's kind of going off, but other than that, man, my thoughts always go to the medieval, and this because could be recency bias with House of the Dragon coming and Game of Thrones coming back, Lord of the Rings, and I'm all about that. Like I talk about mythology and lore and world building, but I'm a fan of Norse mythology. Let's pit the berserkers against the predators in a mountain range in Scandinavia in the snow. That's something I think that could be a lot of fun. So those are some thoughts for me is where that you could possibly take this in the future. But again, I'm just going to give a shout out again to Dan Trachtenberg for bringing a freshness to this and some excitement and refueling the franchise here.
I also cannot get enough Vikings for sure.
Yeah, there we go.
Vikings would be great. Yeah.
I love Jason's idea actually of the alternate timeline with the Comanche getting advanced tech, almost kind of again taking that Wakanda step where now they're becoming this advanced technology. That's kind of a cool idea. I really do like that. When you were asking where can they take it, I was like, well, more where will they take it? And unfortunately, where we're gonna get Cowboys versus Aliens Part 2. And we're gonna get Knights of the Round Table versus Predator. Puke. We're gonna get samurais and ninjas versus the Predator. Puke. So they're gonna bleed this for everything it's worth until there's nothing left and they have to do another streaming movie. That's what's gonna happen. But talking about what I would do with it again, I really love that advanced technology idea and the alternate timeline. But I had this idea, and I'm glad that you brought up snow too, because in my idea when I was writing down my dream scenario was going to be 3 predators or so are on a ship that crashes on another planet, not on Earth, but on another planet in a mountain range where there's snow to start off with, and they get attacked by the people of that planet who are human-like, and they have high-tech stuff to hunt the predators. They can see the predators with infrared and whatnot. And one of the predators gets killed. They make their way down the mountain into like the forest, which is really where he's best. Another one of them gets killed, and then you've got this last predator for the first time in the series is no longer the hunter; he's the hunted. And I thought that would be kind of a cool spin on it.
Very cool.
That's awesome. And you're right. They are going to bleed it because that's all Hollywood can do now is bleed it. It's like, oh, this made a little money. This got a little of attention. How can we do 10 more right now? Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, there's so many conversations going on in the studio right now, probably about fan servicing and putting together dream matchups, right? Bringing the Predator in to save the Terminator franchise, or going against Halo Master Chief and his crew, and all those different things. So there's definitely fan servicing out there that could be explored. I kind of look at a movie like Prey, and I'm definitely a franchise guy, so I love seeing long-term franchises be able to explore different iterations, different angles of it. So I want it to last and have different revamps and as much as it can. So when something like this happens, there's kind of 2 approaches, right? You can layer up on it and just do what you did more and bigger effects and bigger explosions, or you could take a more careful approach and strip it down and really go to the core elements. I'm kind of aligned with Wayne, where I would love to see the Predator without the gadgets and out the tools, and what does it look like to strip that character down and really maybe lean more on a strategy and maybe some more hand-to-hand combat things and going against a superior opponent. I think those are all things that would just add another layer to it. And for so long, we've seen them come in as that horror villain, but they've tested it out. You look at AVP, where they're going against the alien foe, but they're building that relationship with the human, and now you're starting to turn behind and root for them. Or in the end of Predators, when he's going against the larger one, and there's different, even within the species, different hierarchy to that. So I think there's a lot of layers to explore where maybe the Predator is more the protagonist of the entire film. I think you have to carry that in a very strategic way, just given the the dialogue and how you're building the connection to it and what that relationship looks like to the audience. But a lot of layers that you could tap into that would flip the mix a little bit from what we've seen in these past iterations.
Love that. This to me is the only option, and this is the ultimate option. I mean, yes, Samurai is fun, Vikings, those are all great ideas, but they're going to continue to milk it and bleed it until it's nothing and it's not enjoyable anymore. To me, there is only one option, and that is starting with young Dutch, young Dylan, earlier in their military careers before, but it's split, right? So you're alternating between young Dutch and Dylan in their early military, their special forces career, Billy, them as young men doing their special ops, compared to the climbing of the Predator, the Predator chain of command. How do you go from being this low-level hunter to being the guy that gets to come to Earth and hunt Dutch eventually? A build up to that. Now, granted, there's already a couple of cheesy things that are going to happen if they do that. There's going to be a lot of transcribing of the Predator language. They don't speak English, so they're going to be talking to each other. I don't really want to see them have relationships. It's like, oh, is the Predator dating that Predator? Oh, I don't really like her. I like this other Predator. Betsy's so much cooler, man. She's got the little laser thing, but it's painted pink. It's so cool, so. But to me, it's like, and if it starts off, and if you can tell, I've invested some time and some spirit into this. If it starts off with Dutch is like a high-level commander, and even if Arnold's in it for 2 minutes, the first scene is just him commanding, young people, and then and it's a flashback to the young Dutch and young Dylan, obviously played by Carl Weathers. So they got to find some great buff actors that can play off the 80s vibe. But to me, that's the only interesting way forward. What do you guys think about that? Would that be fun or interesting to you?
I love that idea, Kyle. Well thought out. Maybe you should be directing the next film. Now, it brought up a question that I had written down, actually, because it's something I thought about, was, do we have any desire to go to the Predator homeworld and see, because we mistakenly, I think, Predators, the Robert Rodriguez film, we think that maybe they're on the Predator homeworld, but that's just a game preserved world that they've landed on. We still haven't seen their homeworld. How does their society work and exist? Is there a class system? How do they decide among themselves who governs? Do we actually want to see that? I think in small doses, yeah, that's why I like your idea. I think to get like a parallel storyline with the young Dutch and how they're coming up through the ranks versus how the Predators come up through the ranks and the separate training regimens and stuff, and then they have to go head to head. That's interesting. I mean, hey man, yeah, give me Dutch any day. So
yeah, it's going to have a lot of flaws with it, but that's what interests me. It's, there are a lot of issues, like really, like you said, it would have to be in small doses. So if that's how we're doing it, then really it's just about a specialized military guy. And there's none of those movies. So it's definitely unique, and it's, and it's as I presented it. So, well, this was a fun roundtable. I want to give Mike a minute here, though. He is the founder. He is the brains behind Ship It. And I want to give him a minute to talk about what it is and why it's cool.
Yeah, we just on our end love making film content and trying to take it to the next level, really. So, not even just looking at a film and just talking about what happened on screen and just replaying that over. A lot of the content that we try to tackle is taking that to the next level, and is that pitching new ideas, new concepts, recasting things, taking characters and kind of putting them in different situations. So we really make content for the fans, and we feel like as we're by the fans that we're trying to add those extra elements to it to make it more of a unique experience and make it a little bit more interactive and another way to really complement that movie viewing experience. So you can definitely come and check us out at shipitstudios.com. And really, as we've gone through and assembled, every piece of content we're doing is trying to take that really unique format that goes beyond just a standard film review and bring in these subject matter experts, where if you go and listen to an 80s podcast, these people can really talk to all the elements in that era and really compare them side by side and going down the way and taking different unique formats of that. So definitely would be check us out. We're looking forward to doing a lot more of these more roundtable discussions and assembling this mix of these different hosts from different shows that all have different personalities and viewpoints. And I'm really excited just about the prospect of coming together and tackling the iconic films and the iconic franchises that we all love.
That's awesome. We're stoked to be a part of it. It's fun to take a new approach to movies besides the boring movie review. I love listening to all these various shows, hearing these different types of approaches to the films I love. Everyone's fantastic. You've assembled quite the crew. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me for this roundtable. This is our first one, and I can already see that there's more in our future. This was a lot of fun. I want to thank you all for listening. Please, if you're a fan of our various shows, please send us your thoughts on Prey. We want to hear about it. If you want to hear more content from these podcasts individually, please send Wayne, send Jason, send Mike and myself messages. We're easy to find. So find us and let us know what you want to see. But thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Jason.
I'm Wayne G.
And I'm Mike.
Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good one.